It's so great to be on this stage with both of you, friends and people I admire so much. But we have some serious topics to go through. The past 2 years have seen the highest number of violent conflicts since the end of World War II. From Gaza and Ukraine to many other conflicts that don't make the headlines, such as Sudan and Haiti. Why is peacemaking in crisis, and what is needed to rebuild trust and peace?
Well, Don, I promise I'll come back to your question, because
This is what politicians do, you know.
But I actually want to say how delighted I am to be back in Skoll. It's been a few years, and it's just wonderful. I've met so many friends. I've met so many young people who are here for the first time who are deeply impressive, and it brings back memories of coming in earlier years when Jeff Skoll himself was here. And I remember Jeff's vision for Skoll. I remember he knew in detail what the various people that were invited were doing. He'd been there, and he'd talk about it when he introduced them. Do you remember when I was with you? And and it was just this hands-on, wonderful sense of somebody. And he must be very proud. 1,300,
We're over 1,500 this year.
1,500, oh my God. Yeah. But just somehow, it is a wonderful forum, and it's great to see. We do need to meet from time to time and to recharge each other. Your question, very tough one. A tough one, but I was thinking, what is lacking in our world today, to be honest, is leadership. Leadership that actually will take on board the very difficult issues and the geopolitical shifts that are taking place and the need for a fairer world all around the place. And, I'm with another High Commissioner, so let me just be a little bit personal in a way about that. When I served as High Commissioner for Human Rights from 1997 to 2002, I had literally governments that were helpful. Quite a lot of them, fair enough, were Western governments, Canada, Australia at the time, and other times, Nordic countries, of course, my own country, Ireland a bit, but also small island states and various other countries, would actually help in support of human rights, in support of what the High Commissioner was trying to do. It was, I think the world has got progressively more difficult for every High Commissioner. I'm sure Zeid would kind of agree with that. And it's now at its most difficult for the UN generally and for anybody serving as UN High Commissioner. But it's because we don't have, fair, honest, consistent leadership. We have double standards all around the world, not just in the so-called North, but double standards generally. And we have inconsistency, and we have not living the values that we use the rhetoric about, but don't implement and uphold. And it's become tough because we also have the pressure of social media, which is making everything very short-term, immediate, sugar to the brain, flick, flick, flick. And that's meaning that people want populist answers to everything, even though the problems are complex. And that includes peacemaking, peace building. These are complex, messy, coalition-building things, and we need to remember that.
Absolutely. I'm going to build on that a little, and Zeid, maybe you'll take the first shot at this one. The elders have been focusing on existential threats that put the future of humanity at risk. And you're urging those in power to show the long view leadership that Mary talked about to face these threats. Can you first tell us what you see as the threats? And I know you're working on a number of them. And also how you see long view leadership's ability to provide ways to address those threats.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Don. It's my first visit to Skoll. To all the Muslims in the crowd, a happy Eid for a successful fast. And I know those of you who know me have heard me say this before. When my son was about 4 years old, and he asked my wife, what is he doing? And my wife explained to him that I was fasting. he looked at her and he said, "Ah, yes, he may be fasting, but I am still the fastest." So there was this wonderful author.
It's all right, he will answer the question eventually.
I will get to it. Wonderful author who lived a most adventurous life during the 20th century and fought in the First World War. And in 1936 published a lyrical account of his experiences in the war. And in one passage, he makes reference to the invincibility of man's stupidity. And I think the choice of the word man was appropriate. If you ask me what the major threat is, we are releasing ourselves from the protection of the law and marching ourselves into a state of terminal stupidity. We have basically constructed for ourselves a set of rules, and the rules are based on traditions. We are now prepared to violate the rules with ever greater frequency, and the leading nations are at the forefront of doing this. And those who are supposed to be the guardians of the rules are not strong enough to maintain them. So it would be like having a Premier League football match where the star players are fouling each other and fouling others, and no one is paying any attention to the referee or the linespersons. And when you look at where raw power is, it lies with the clubs, it lies with the star players. They command huge salaries, they have huge followings. No one knows who the referee is often. And the referee is just like the rest of us, takes the bus, takes the tube home, but is essential for the conduct of the game. And if there are normative rules, there are those charged with upholding them, they also have to do their job. So it's a combination. We see the spread of these conflicts, as you said. And there's a very strange thing. I don't know if any of you have noticed this. Yes, you have a terrible situation in Haiti, and we have a terrible situation in Myanmar and Afghanistan, and beyond, the immediate Middle East. But if you look at longitude 35 east, this one meridian, and how many conflicts exist on it, it is startling, because you have Ukraine, Gaza, you have Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan. It's just to the east of the DRC, and we are very fearful of that. And of course, Mozambique as well. One line of meridian. Now this, I don't want to spawn conspiracy theories. But Jordan is close to that one line, and I might be moving out of that. No, I mean, it's a strange quirk, really.
He didn't answer anything about Longview leadership.
Yeah, you're going to do that one?
Not a thing, not a word.
No, so, no.
Anybody who wants to join the Elders Advisory Council, this is what you get to experience.
Would you like me to jump in?
No, so I don't know if any of you noticed, there was a very famous discussion that Mary conducted during COP28, where she interrupted someone, and it had like 500 million views, right? So I don't mind if she interrupts me if it leads to something like that. It's difficult, yeah? It's difficult because you require those to climb ladders and look beyond the horizon, have a deep knowledge of history, of law, of economics. And quite frankly, I tried this experiment with university students the world over, and I always get the same response. We just don't have enough talent. And as Mary said, at that top tier, where people are fully understanding of the consequences of their decisions. There was a time when, after the Second World War, the Adenauer generation, it eschewed populist politics because it saw what happened, a combination of the Nazis, the fascists in Italy, and then where Stalin brought the Soviet Union, created a condition for the world which was almost brought it to the point of collapse. And yet, and Jörg Haider, when he first emerged in Klagenfurt in Austria, provoked an enormous reaction from the European continent. Europe did not want to go back there, did not want to go back to populist politics. And then Berlusconi comes along and starts to sort of mainstream the feeling, and now it's everywhere. And people can't seem to distinguish between a lie or a falsehood and the truth. But we ourselves are part to blame here, that we're so gullible that we believe and are so desperate for fantasy and so concerned about boredom that anything fantastic is more likely to grab our attention. So we are also partly to blame. And I think long-term leadership is something that can cut across that. We have an enormous climate challenge. We all know that. It's barreling down on us with enormous speed. We have a pandemic challenge. We're desperately trying to put a treaty together, and it may not work. And what does it say about humanity if we can't prevent the next pandemic from happening? So the challenges are great, and it requires leadership of the sort that Mary can provide and does provide to the elders. and that's where I think that's what's needed. But we also have to solve the problems of today.
You want to add to that one?
Oh, just the third one, he forgot, nuclear weapons. And across those three, artificial intelligence. So what we're saying is long-view leadership means not just trying to manage these hugely complex problems, but actually trying to solve them, trying to build the coalitions of effort, really get to where we need to be on the climate and nature crisis, the pandemic crisis, the nuclear crisis, nuclear weapons. Secondly, use science and reason as our guide. And thirdly, listen to everyone, listen to those most affected, be inclusive in the approach, etc.
So profound.
That's it, isn't it?
That's it.
Okay, they agree. They've solved that one. You've both held multiple roles within the UN system, which is really sort of our global referee, or the closest we have to one, including probably one of the toughest jobs, High Commissioner for Human Rights. You both know the institution inside out. So what would you do if you were Secretary General today?
Oh, come on. Well, I think it's a really, really difficult position. I hope when she takes over. But no, quite seriously, the UN is a complex thing, but unless there are a significant number of member states who are supportively helping the Secretary General to be general, not secretary, if you know what I mean, it's very difficult. And the UN is kind of squeezed now between these two wars and other wars that we're paying much less attention to, and has lost many. I mean, look at the 200 now, I think it is, lost in Gaza. And it's really a very painful time, and there is little enough, kind of political cop-on that the UN does fulfill the Churchill thing about democracy. It is the worst system, except for all the others. We don't have any other. So, we've always needed to reform, we've always needed to renew. We do need a Security Council that reflects the world. The Security Council, The Security Council is the most important institution because it's about peace and security, and it's the weakest and most double standard, devious, awful at the moment. And it's doing down the UN. It's time. And maybe with the G20 in the hands of Brazil and then South Africa, and it's been India, 3 in succession, we can kind of have more move towards serious UN reform, serious monetary reform, taking on, because of the very fact that we have these problems that we have to solve. And, at the end of the day, the only way in which we will make progress is by multilateral coalition building. It needn't be everybody in the tent, but if enough people are in the tent in the right direction, things can move. And I think we need to be more creative, and we need to bring all of you people, I mean, much more into a UN doing. I was very pleased to hear today, we were at this lunch for Brazil, that Brazil has built a coalition to help them with the G20. That's smart.
That's what we need.
You know, that's really smart. And we need to get smarter and smarter at the moment because the problems are getting worse, especially with this fake news, you know, the role of social media, the role of algorithms dragging young people to the dark side. It's a very difficult world to navigate, and we need to have the UN recentered if possible. So if I was Secretary General, I'd be awfully bossy. That's the only thing I can say.
Yeah. So what would I do if I was Secretary General? The first thing is I'd hire everyone who's here, basically. I disagree with Mary. I don't think it's that difficult a job. I don't think it's more difficult than the job we had. We, as High Commissioners, covered all fields except for nuclear weapons, perhaps. We came under intense pressure. We were disliked by every government, practically. And we were constantly having to battle inside the UN as well, because they didn't like it that you had an outspoken Mary Robinson or you had an outspoken Zeid Hussein. So I think we already experienced the most difficult of UN jobs. You just have to be prepared to do it. And it's not about being liked by governments. It's about being respected by governments.
Absolutely.
And that you have to stand up. And where they default in their treatment of their own people, you have to be clear, not mealy-mouthed and sort of playing around with terms. And Mary's point about moral consistency is clear too. You have to be morally consistent. The Security Council is not. Neither is, by the way, the Human Rights Council, because basically the member states, and the member states play fast and loose with these issues. But you try as a UN leader to be as consistent and non-selective. And I think that's really what's required. If the Secretary General feels they're unable to do it, then they have to appoint people who can do it. And if the appointments are weak and we're all wringing our hands, wondering why the world is in such a bad state, well, there's a reason for it. Again, it's on both sides. You have those national leaders who are willing to break the rules, and then you have the international leaders who are allowing them to do it. And both have to be adjusted for. So I actually am not overly pessimistic, because I know with a few changes in government, you know, if you elect the right people, and you have and
it's happening. Look at Turkey, look at Poland, look at,
suddenly we go from deep pessimism to a sort of a mild optimism, and things can happen. And so we seesaw between these feelings, and we frighten ourselves to death, and then we recover. So the human ability to recover is, but I mean, there's no doubting the challenges are enormous as well.
It's a perfect setup for what I wanted to ask you both about. In case the audience hasn't figured it out, you're both known for speaking truth to power and for making change happen against inertia and opposition of major powers. Zeid mentioned it before, but Mary, you challenged the president of COP28 to commit to the phasing out of fossil fuels. He questioned you and the science behind that urgent need. And as Al Gore, my old boss, said, don't ever try to mansplain Mary Robinson. It doesn't work. And it didn't, by the way. For the first time in history of the COP process, governments agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. So.
Well, okay.
We have all these change makers in this audience. What's your advice to them about fighting the good fight on the front lines? And as you both have done throughout your careers, how do you make change happen?
I don't know how to give advice to the people here who have such incredible wisdom in themselves and such incredible determination and endeavor. I do think one thing that we all could benefit from is not just doing our piece of making a better future, and all of you are engaged in so many different ways, and we don't connect enough. we have to learn, because we have to know our power in this world of ours. And we have to connect in order to understand that we are on the cusp of a clean energy, much better, safer, fairer world. We're actually moving faster, but we're not moving nearly fast enough for the science. And this is very serious. So we need to know our power through connection. Indigenous peoples, young people, entrepreneurs, women at grassroots, business, philanthropy, filmmakers, artists, everybody. And some of us here, including Pat Mitchell, who'll be dialoguing with Jacinta Ardern next, I understand, Connected Women leader, we came together with our dandelion. I do see quite a few dandelions around the room.
Yay, dandelion.
And just to explain very briefly, because I'm passionate about this anyway, but it is relevant. The dandelion, first of all, I learned the power of symbols when I was elected the first woman president of Ireland in 1990. I said I would put a light in the window of my official residence for all of those who had to leave Ireland over the centuries because of conflict, because of poverty, because of sexual orientation with the Catholic Church clamping down on everything, and so on. And that light took on a life of its own. It was unbelievable. It shaped an Irish diaspora, which wasn't there before. It shaped that sense of connection, of family. It built, it just did. And then the government responded with completely different policies because we had a diaspora and we belonged to each other, and somehow the light had made this happen. I think this dandelion symbol, because it's nature, so we're using nature to guide us. It's also very resilient. In my culture and in many cultures, it's a weed. And if you try to get rid of it, you don't, because it keeps coming back. So it's resilient. And then it's regenerative of the soil with its deep roots. You could eat or drink every part of the dandelion. And how do you spread it? So it's a perfect way of saying it's not enough now that each of us is trying our best to do what we're doing on girls' education, on all sorts of things. I can't tell you how impressed I've been, especially with the new fellows here. Hands up the new fellows. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've met quite a lot of you, and you're very impressive. Anyway, but it's not enough to be doing alone anymore and thinking I'm making my contribution. No, we've got to connect, and we've got to know our power, and then we've got to shift the money, get the governments to stop subsidizing. And I'll just give you the figure of the B team of business leaders that I belong to, that the world spends $1.8 trillion every year, $1.8 trillion every year on what is harming us, primarily fossil fuel. So transitioning out of fossil fuel is not a slow business. We've got to do it really fast, and we've got to shift the money. And if we shift the money, we will have the trillions that are needed for what needs to be done, and especially in developing countries. And it's so exciting, this world that we can and must get to. But we have to know our power, and we have to connect to know our power, and we need nature to guide us. And I think the dandelion is perfect.
That's a beautiful answer. Zeid, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so...
You're brave to go after her. But,
yeah. Yes, no,
so if he disagrees with me again, we'll fight.
So 2 points. When I think of the fossil fuel industry or the pharmaceutical industry or any industry that's deemed to be standing in the way of making the world a safer place for us, and I speak of the pharmaceuticals not in terms of the products that they produce, and we know the position of Oxford University and the way that they suspended IP rights when it came to the use of a vaccine, and should be lauded for it. But it reminds me of the two brothers in New York in the 1830s and 40s, the Tappan brothers, who were very successful merchants and very much a presence in New York high society. And they decided to join the ranks of humanists, of religious figures, by becoming abolitionists. And they were deemed as having betrayed their own class. And their homes were attacked and torched. But it was pivotal because someone from within decided to become against. And where in the pharmaceutical industry or in the fossil fuel industry is the Tappan brother of tomorrow or the Tappan brothers of tomorrow? And we have to encourage them. You know, once that changes, then the world changes quickly. The other person I think about when I think about the way you frame the question and how we should answer it is I think of Hannibal, and I think of the Second Punic Wars. And right away, you're going to think this man is completely insane. He's a former human rights fellow talking about Hannibal. But in what sense am I speaking about this? So when Hannibal had to get his elephants across the pass into Italy, there was only one pass he could cross, the Col della Travasse. It was wide enough. Elephants did sadly fall to their death, but he could get most of his army up and across. And I think all of us work for organizations where we know that we do good, but ultimately it's a big world out there. And sadly, we have to also recognize that much of what we do is pinprick. It's not having the effect we think it will have. And we can go across organization to organization, and we know this. We can still feel good about it, but you have to put it in perspective. So the thing to do is recognizing you can't get the elephants up to the pass. It's just too difficult. You can anticipate where the elephants are going to cross in, and you position yourself at the pass with a better set of data, better knowledge, and advice on where they should go after that. And it doesn't mean that they all attack the Romans. I mean, basically, you help direct them down. And I think if all our organizations were doing that, the compound effect of it would be enormous. And that's my advice, I think.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I could stay in conversation with the two of you forever, but getting this little time clock up there telling we have to end this. When it
says we have to exit.
Yeah, we'll go off 1 second. When I first joined Skoll, and I was asking Jeff about what is this elders thing, he said it's the most important investment we could make. And to you both, I proved him right again. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.